it's Catherine Shahar, and today's training session is all about small group guided writing and editing in Key Stage 2. So the outcomes for this session, I'm going to be explaining to you what small group guided writing and editing process is and why we do them. We're going to be looking at how you can prepare before the lesson. Then we're going to explore the differentiation. So obviously when you're working with a group of children, they can range in ability massively. So it'll be looking at children with special educational needs or disabilities, looking at children who have English as an additional language, also looking at children who are working towards the expected level for their year group, and looking at how we can support children who are working at a level of greater depth within their year group expectations. We're then going to be focusing on the editing process, and I'm going to be giving you some hints and tips and a little process to follow which you will find useful when working with your small groups. So let's start off with what small group guided writing and editing is. So it's an approach where a teacher or teaching assistant works with a small group of students who have similar writing needs, and it can be thought of as a group conference or discussion or as a small group mini lesson. It will be undertaken in response to an identified challenge faced by those select students. So the formation of the group and the focus and the time they spend together will be based on the teacher's ongoing formative assessment process. So that means that you will be given a group by the teacher. The teacher has identified that they all have a specific or certain need, and that is the area that you are going to focus on within that group. So why is this important? So specific directed support for an individual or a small group allows for really targeted and bespoke support over a much more sustained period of time. And this in turn allows for a great impact with even greater results. So there will be a specific focus for that group to achieve, and it can be for them to achieve it within that lesson or over a number of sessions. So small group sessions may take place within the classroom during the lesson. They may take place outside of the classroom, so within a designated intervention zone, or they may take place after that lesson has been completed and taken place. And that can be classed as a form of intervention, as pre or post teaching. So before the lesson. So preparation is key. It's really important that you have read the appropriate text before the lesson has begun. So often a piece of writing is based on a specific text or a specific focus. You need to understand what that text is about. You need to know the characters, the setting, the plot. You need to know that inside out. And you're going to be explaining that to the children as and when you go. So know what the end piece of writing is. What's the intended outcome for that session for those children? Are you building up to a bigger piece? Is it part of a journey? Is it a piece on its own? Spend time discussing the outcomes for that group with the class teacher, so you really know what to teach and what the end goal of the lesson is and what the end goal of that piece of writing is. The more knowledge that you have, the better prepared you are and the better the session is going to go. Have strong subject knowledge. Have a strong knowledge about what you're teaching and what you're supporting the children with. Make sure you feel confident in using and applying what the children need to include. So hopefully these subject knowledge and training sessions that I'm putting together will be supporting this, but you may need to spend some time outside of the classroom doing some research on how to use and apply certain skills before the lesson. And that's totally fine. Teachers do that as well as they are preparing and planning sessions. They will be improving their own subject knowledge as well. So if you feel you're being asked to teach a specific skill or a piece of knowledge that you're not quite up to scratch with, please take the time to be secure in that. Discuss it with the teacher, do some research on your own, because if you're secure in the knowledge, then the children will benefit from that as well. And make sure you have any pre-prepared resources to hand for your group, such as handouts, photocopies of the book, photograph, physical resources, anything like that you're going to need. It'll help the session run much more smoothly. And set up your intervention space if you're not in the classroom. So have your resources at the ready and your vocabulary displayed. Okay, so now we're going to be looking at differentiation, because we're well aware that when you're working with a group of children, they often have very, very different abilities. So it's important that you know how you can support each of the different ability groups, so to speak. More often than not, TAs are asked to work with the groups of the children who are the most vulnerable. When I found and read that quote, it really hit home to me, because I think it's totally true. As TAs and SSAs, you often work with the most vulnerable children, and that can be vulnerable academically, vulnerable socially, emotionally. So it's really important that your little session and your small group has a really big impact on that child and those children that you're working with. So when we're working with children who are not at the expected standard, so this could be SEND children, this could be EAL children, and this will often be children who are working towards the year group expectation. Teachers often use the pre-key stage standards to help assess them and support their specific needs. So there's a set for pre-key stage 1 and a set for pre-key stage 2. So within the Key Stage 2 standards framework, there are 6 standards which contain a number of pupil can statements. And now it's not to say that as a teaching assistant or a special support assistant that you need to be continually assessing them. That does fall down to the teacher, because it's the pupils are their responsibility. But it's important that you have a good knowledge and understanding of where that child is at. So if your teacher says to you, this child is working at a pre-Key Stage 2 standard level 3, you know where that child is working towards. So I've just inserted some of the screen grabs. So these are standards 1 and 2. And as you move on to 3 and 4, they do get a little bit longer. And 5 and 6 again get even longer. Now I've just quickly flicked through these, but please feel free to rewind, pause the video, and make notes on them. I will link the pre-Key Stage 2 standards documents in the description box below for you to refer to in your own time. It's really, really useful. It's good for you to see, and it just arms you with that little bit more knowledge that you can use to help support your small group. So let's take a look at working with children who have a special educational need or disability when they're working within the mainstream classroom. So quite often children who are on the SEND register might not have an EHCP, might not have targeted support. So you will quite often be asked to work with a group of children with SEND or a child within a group that has SEND. So it's really important that you know how you can support that specific child or those specific children. So start by looking at understanding what the objective is. Can the child access the objective? Can the child access the task that they've been asked to do? If not, you might need to think about how you can differentiate it for that child or for those group of children. Maybe you need to get some extra resources in place. Maybe you need to speak to the teacher about how they can support you with that. Okay, but it's really key that you understand what the objective and the end goal is. So keep instructions to 1 or 2 parts only. So chunk the sequence of instructions. So deliver one at a time vocally, print them off one at a time on separate cards, model them in numbered steps, etc. Allow a couple of minutes of processing time. Okay, sometimes children with SEND need a little bit of extra processing time. So give them that time and then ask them to repeat the instructions back so you know that they know what they are supposed to be doing. Take time to model the tasks and provide examples of a finished product for the children. So this is a way of giving instructions without relying on words. They can clearly see what you want them to achieve at the end of the session, and it gives them an end goal to work towards. If the student has really good vocabulary or speaking and listening skills, use the small group as a basis of discussion, role play, group work, etc. and use that as an opportunity to build their self-esteem. Okay, because sometimes children with SEND have a slightly lower self-esteem than the rest of the class because they feel a little bit different, they might feel a bit isolated. So it's really important that we do everything we can when we're working with these children to really boost their self-esteem and their confidence. And in turn, that'll boost their ability as well. So use resources to scaffold the writing when with writing frames. For example, you can use Mapos grids, word lists, etc. Try and allow time for written tasks to be completed. Don't rush them. Maybe they need to return to the task at the end of the lesson, at the end of the day, at the beginning of the next lesson. That's totally fine. Try and minimise copying things from the board. Have things pre-written, stuck in books. If you can see that a child is struggling to write a sentence opener, have that sentence opener prepared for them, have it ready to stick in for them, and let them complete the end of that sentence. All things like that will really support a child with SEND in the classroom environment. It's really important that we also create multi-sensory experiences to engage children. I have got a slide in a couple of minutes to go through some examples of multi-sensory experiences for you to give you ideas. But don't think that just because a child is in Key Stage 2, they shouldn't have access to this. Your small group role, your ability is you really need to facilitate these experiences for those children. If they're appropriate, then use them. Just because the child is in Year 6 doesn't mean they don't need to get the Play-Doh out to help them form words. Okay, if it's appropriate and relevant, that's totally fine for you to do so. Have brain breaks. It can stop the children getting overwhelmed. It can give them a chance to process what they've done. It can give them a chance to reflect on what they've done. Sometimes they need just to have a quick stretch, have a wiggle around, or maybe they need to go and take them outside for a run around, burn off a lot of excess energy. Liaise this with the class teacher. It's fine. If a child needs it and it's appropriate and it will support them in their learning, then it's totally fine for you to do things like that with them. Try and record practical work on apps such as Seesaw, and that's a great one that's used across our schools. Maybe you want to take a photograph to show their parents, their teacher, record it for their books. It's fine. Don't expect children to produce really big, long, extended pieces of writing if it's not appropriate for them to do so. Maybe they've done it practically, maybe they've done it on a glitter tray, some Play-Doh, maybe they've acted it out. Record it, video it, that's absolutely fine. As long as you can see the piece of work for that child, we know that that's totally acceptable. So here are a couple of practical resources and ideas that you might be able to use with your group. So there's pencil grips to support the children in the comfort of their writing. Maybe a writing slope can be used if you find that a child sometimes has their face really close to the piece of writing that they're doing. They might just need to have it repositioned a little bit higher for them. Use timers. Chunk the writing sections. Give them a 5-minute time, a 10-minute time, at 15, whatever is appropriate for that child, for that group. And give them that as an end goal. Okay, so we'll work for 10 minutes doing this piece of writing, then we will have a brain break. It really helps them focus and drives them because they can see the small end goal target. Use visual aids such as overlays or rulers to help guide the focus when they're reading. Quite often children with SEND, for example Earlham syndrome, need to have an overlay. It helps children read what's on the page. It stops the words getting muddled up on the page. Children with dyslexia might find this useful as well. And even if a child doesn't have a diagnosis for something, it can help focus their mind as well. Use things like talking buttons or voice recorders. Use them to record instructions, use it to record input, use it to record ideas, and then the child will be able to build their independence by, rather than continuously asking you for support, they'll be able to refer to the talking button or recorder to replay that section, that instruction, or anything that they feel they need that would help them. And it's really important that we consider the environment that SEND children work in. Quite often classrooms can be really busy, they have lots of displays, working walls, and while these are all beautiful, sometimes they can be a little overstimulating for children with SEND. So consider a calm environment within the classroom, outside the classroom, somewhere with reduced noise. Obviously, if you cannot facilitate that, maybe the use of a private working station may help. The use of earmuffs may help muffle sound if it's too loud for the children. Anything like that to help promote a calm environment. So here are some examples of some multi-sensory ideas that you can use. We've got a sand tray, glitter tray, we've got some Play-Doh on letters, we've got using tweezers to pick up objects to fill in letters, to make words, developing the motor skills in that way. Anything like this is totally fine if it's appropriate for the child that you're working with or the children that you are working with. Obviously, if you've only ever worked in Key Stage 2, you might not be used to using things like this in your lessons. So please speak to your Senko, please speak to your EYFS teachers. They are wonderful banks of knowledge to really give you lots of multisensory ideas in there. Anything practical, anything engaging, anything exciting will really help capture the child's interest and in turn develop their confidence and ability. So just having a look at some activities and ideas that you can then use within your small groups. So looking at rearranging the words. So maybe have pre-made words or phrases appropriate to the writing task, cut out and mixed up. Get the children to rearrange the letters or to build the words, rearrange the words to build sentence models. And the children can then use these and adapt these in their own writing. There's a really good idea of using box it up. So that's if children struggle to read their own writing, have boxes for each word to go into. You can always put the first letter of each word in each box as they go if this is something they need at first, so you can create a sentence together and do it that way. And then that really helps support children in separating the sentence out in their head, separating it into separate words, and then it helps them read it back to themselves and you at the end, because you can really clearly see the spaces in that sentence. Hold a sentence is a fantastic idea. It is a technique used in readwriting phonics. So you can ask the child to verbally generate a sentence, or you generate it together. Repeat it out loud multiple times, my turn, your turn, etc. Read it multiple times so you've got it modelled, written down for them, and then it disappears and the child writes it down from memory. So it's just the idea of committing something to memory, constantly saying it. The more confident they are in saying the word, the sentence, the more confident they will be in writing it. Link things to their world, related to family, related to their friends, related to their own experiences. If a child can engage with an activity on a personal level, they will find it really much easier to write about. Use pictures and videos linked to the text to support their engagement and interest. So maybe you need to use some YouTube videos, maybe you need to get some pictures photocopied from the text or create your own pictures. That's fine. Use that as well to support their engagement and interest. And don't forget, there's lots of technology out there that we can use to support it. So it's using different apps, for example, Seesaw, where work can be set. There's some amazing apps where children can practice their letter formation, brilliant websites. Use all those as and when appropriate as well. And I did miss out the scribing part as well. So sometimes you may feel you need to scribe for your child, if that will help ease the frustration of their learning process. Obviously, if they have done some amazing writing and you can see that they're getting a little bit tired, have a brain break, but sometimes you will need to step in and scribe a little bit for them if it's appropriate to do so. And obviously, you know your children best, you know when and how to make that call. So now we're going to be looking at children who have English as additional language within the mainstream classroom. Okay, so provide key topic specific vocabulary for those children. Okay, make sure it's in a context. Use pictures or videos to support their understanding, to help them define what those words mean. Allow them to take home a copy of the definitions, put them in a book, or create some flashcards in school so they can practice them at home. Have a specific book or a display just for them to refer to. If they have their own resources, if they're taking them home, the children will be very excited to practice them at home, to teach their parents, to teach their siblings, and will again build their confidence and their ability. Scaffolding is really important, so provide these children with sentence starters, key vocabulary, grammatical structures, etc. It might not come naturally to them at first because their sentence structures will be different or could be different in their home language, so it's really important that you facilitate their sentences by providing the structures for them at first, and obviously remove them as and when you feel is appropriate to do so. Translation is a really big key aspect for children who have English as an additional language. So use translation tools on a device such as an iPad, or provide translations of keywords in their home language. Google Translate is a great place to start. It's not always the most reliable, but it is a good place to start for you to help them understand English words and for you to understand words in their language as well, which might come in useful. So maybe you can sit them near a child in the classroom who also speaks their home language and English to help them translate. Sometimes this isn't possible, but if you do find you have a child who can help translate, please do that as well, because it will help build friendships and it will help build confidence for all the children involved. It's really important for children who have EAL to give really clear instructions. So give written instructions with pictures and vocal instructions. They can be pre-prepared or they can be scribed during the lesson. Or you can use things like the sound buttons, as we mentioned before, so the children have access to these instructions continuously. Phonics is a good place to start as well. So maybe you can use phonic charts if it's appropriate, or the children are accessing phonics sessions. Maybe they're accessing results like toe by toe, things like that. Use those phonics knowledge, that phonics knowledge and that information again in their writing, because that again all tie in, will help build confidence. Try and teach the common and sight words. So if a child has common words to fall back on, the blank page will seem much less daunting for them when they're writing. And support them in generating a mind map of ideas. So doing this before the session or before the piece of writing will help the child form the structure of the writing in their head, and again build their confidence and make that experience much less daunting for them. Okay, so now we're going to be looking at children working towards the expected standard. So these again may still be children who are working at pre-Key Stage 2 level or in the previous year group, depending on their ability. So here's some ideas. So we've got some story mapping. So this is a fantastic technique where pictures and symbols are used to plan out the journey of the text. So this helps the child visualize what they're going to write or have written as a class. New symbols then can be drawn on post-it notes and stuck over the top to generate new sentences for children to use. So that's swapping and interchanging of vocabulary. So this allows for imitation, for confidence and innovation to create their own piece of writing. So similar to that, we've got post-it note swapping. So this can be where you produce a small piece of writing as a group, or use the whole class shared writes and post-it note different words, so adjectives, nouns, verbs, etc., over the top of what you've written. And again, this allows the child to generate new sentences using structures that are familiar to them and structures that you have created together. The use of writing frames is a fantastic place to start as well. So having a scaffold to follow makes the page much less daunting. Okay, it will show the children how to set out their writing, and it will also prompt them to include certain features, so having clear labelled boxes or sections to write in. They might have headings, they might have symbols, they might have pictures on there, anything that can help prompt the children. Something that was also very useful is a recipe for success, and this is a clear success criteria, and it can be made with the child or with the children. It can be pre-made, it can be produced there and then, and this allows them to really focus on the specific elements needed in that piece of writing, and it will create a real sense of achievement when different sections can be ticked off. So as they've remembered to include certain parts, it can be really exciting for them to go, oh fantastic, I've used it, I can tick it off now. Okay, and there's a few more examples on here for working towards the expected standard. So once the vocabulary has been discussed and mapped out, so either as a whole class or within the group, different games can be played to investigate the meaning behind them. Okay, so children who are working towards the expected standard might not have the understanding of the vocabulary. So it's really important that within that small group, you take the time to really drill down and understand what the specific vocabulary means. So you can do games such as matching the nouns to objects, to pictures, matching antonyms. It can be pairing past and present tense. It can be ordering synonyms. It can be miming out adjectives and nouns, maybe a bit of a guess what the TA is drawing and match the word. It can be matching adjectives to nouns to create noun phrases, Okay, there's loads and loads of different games that you can play. So the main point within playing those games is that the children get a really good chance to experiment and define the words in a context that they will be using then in their writing. If they understand it, they're much more likely to be using the words in an accurate and appropriate manner. Okay, so use sentence strips to generate shared sentences and edit them together. Maybe they can be used to experiment with clause order, subordination and coordination. You can cut them up, stick them back together with pieces of tape, and allows them to really have hands-on, malleable experiences with creating sentence structure. Make it exciting, make it engaging, and then children will be able to do that themselves when they're writing on their own. And it's really important that we model a piece of writing by modelling the writing behaviours. So make deliberate mistakes, edit as you go, think aloud. If you do all these techniques that we naturally do as adults and as writers, if you model them as you're going, the children will pick up on these techniques, and they are much more likely to learn them and use them themselves in their own writing. So let's have a look at working towards working at greater depth within the expected standard. So when you're working with children who are at a greater depth, it's really important that you model really high quality writing using waggles. They can be waggles pre-produced, shared as a group. It's really important that it's always high quality. So ensure that your verbal vocabulary is of high quality as well. So for example, if you were using the sentence, I got there by bus, how about we travelled by bus? That sounds much better. Just that simple change really makes a difference. And talking of high quality vocabulary, only accept high quality vocabulary from the children, whether that's verbal or written. If you were describing an ocean, would you accept a child using the word big? No, vast is much more appropriate. Okay, only accept the high quality, high standard of vocabulary. And it's really important that this vocabulary is all around us. So ensuring that there's a really rich environment and sentence structures for children to refer to. So they can be either within your intervention space or it can be on the working wall in the classroom. And it's really important that you encourage the children to refer to these in their writing. So this again links to the modelling of the magpieing ideas. Okay, so it's really important that children magpie ideas from around them, from good models of the children around them. So as you're going around your small group, pick out the fantastic examples that you see, read them out. I guarantee that if you say, John Smith has used this fantastic sentence in their writing, a lot of the rest of the group will try and include something just as good in their writing as well. And finally, it's really important that you teach how to evaluate the vocabulary and sentence structures used. So get the children to read back their work, to reflect on it. That is the difference between a child who's working at the expected standard or who's working at greater depth within the expected standard. It is that evaluation of what they've written and really asking them to bring it up to the next level. And that links very nicely into the editing process. So quite often you might be given a group of children and said, please go and help them edit their writing. That can be quite daunting if you don't have an editing process to follow. Some schools have them already pre-prepared, but I've put this one together for you, which you may find really useful in supporting you and supporting your small group. So by years 3 and 4, children should be able to evaluate and edit their writing by assessing the effectiveness of their own and others' writing. So that's when they're working with a partner to edit their work and to suggest improvements for theirs and another person's work. So they should be able to propose changes to grammar and vocabulary to improve consistency, including the accurate use of pronouns in a sentence. Children should also be able to proofread for spelling and punctuation errors. Now, when children get up to year 5 and 6, you should be able to propose changes in vocabulary and to grammar to enhance sentence effects and to clarify meaning, To ensure that consistent and correct use of tense is used throughout the piece of writing. And it's also the need to ensure that the correct subject-verb agreement is used when using singular and plural writing, distinguishing between language of speech and between language of writing, so they should really understand what they should write and how they should say it instead, and choosing the appropriate register. Children should also be able to continue to proofread for spelling and any punctuation errors. So here is a process of writing. So the first time, edit for content and cohesion. So this is the first time you're editing. So are there any gaps in information? Do the ideas follow in a logical order? Are there any words that can be removed to make the writing more succinct? Is it appropriate for the audience? The second time, look and edit for effect. So how can the writing be made more interesting? By adding in adjectives, adverbs, similes, metaphors, sensory imagery and other appropriate literary devices for that year group. So one strategy is to underline each part of the words in different colours. So this is a rainbow editing process. Maybe you can do nouns in blue, verbs in green, adjectives in yellow, etc. And this really helps the children provide themselves with a visual image of the types of speech and writing that are lacking, and it helps them to really see what they've included lots of and what they need to add. The third time in the editing process is to edit for punctuation and grammar. Is every sentence actually a sentence? Are the paragraphs too large, too small? Do you need other punctuation marks such as question marks, quotation marks, apostrophes, commas in there? Have you missed those in your writing? Have you written throughout in the same tense, and do the verbs match the subject? And in the fourth time, edit for spelling. So hopefully by this stage of the editing process, a lot of the words will have already been corrected as the children have read and noticed. But reading the writing from the last word to the first word is often a good way to pick up spelling mistakes, because you really have to focus on what you're reading and you can't let your eyes get ahead of the game there. So when you read forward, there's a tendency to see what should be written, whereas when you read backwards, your focus changes and you're more likely to identify errors. That's a really good technique that you can model with your group. And here are a few editing tips that I've put together that I think are really useful as well. So you should read a piece of writing out loud to a partner or to themselves or to you as a teacher facilitating the editing process. Work through small sections at a time. If you've written a piece of writing that is 6 paragraphs long, do a paragraph at a time. Don't overwhelm the editing process. Encourage and support partner work. More than one set of eyes always helps, because you will often find somebody will notice a mistake that you've missed. Refer back to the success criteria. Again, encourage the children to tick it off as they go. If they've not done this in their writing, it's a great way for them to self-assess or peer assess what they've done. And remind children to also be looking at great examples in their work. It's not just about making it better or adding it more. The editing process is about evaluating and praising themselves and seeing what they've done and actually going, that piece of writing was really good. I'm proud of that as well. So thank you very much. I hope you found this really, really useful. There is a similar training session for Key Stage 1 writing. Please watch that one as well. Just because you are currently working in Key Stage 2 doesn't mean that the different techniques and strategies cannot be applied across all year groups. If you feel that you need to be doing something to support and benefit the child or children that you're working with, discuss it with the class teacher, share the ideas that you've had, and I'm sure that they feel that anything that you think is appropriate will be worth doing so. As always, I will put the useful documents in the description box below, like I said before. So for example, the pre-Key Stage 2 materials. I would also put the forms in there for you to complete. Please remember to complete the form at the end. This shows me who's accessed the training, so I can keep a log of that. I've put my email address on here as well, so if you've got any questions, comments, thoughts, please get in touch with me and I'm more than happy to help and support you in that. Thank you very much.